Hey. Oh, sorry, I'm not Dan. What's going on, everybody? It's Brian. It's the mainstream. We're about to have an amazing conversation. So glad that you're here to join us. We have, first, I want to introduce myself, Brian. I run a Twitter space called Cardano Over Coffee for 3 years. I've been in crypto since 2016, 2017. I don't know. It's all a blur, right? Everybody knows that crypto is faster than real time. So I don't even know where my life has gone. However, I'm here because Kyle is here and Sam is here, and we're going to talk some amazing things. We're going to talk about Catalyst Project. We're going to talk about honey. We're going to talk about real world assets. We're going to talk about savings and loans. It's going to be a great show. I want to introduce my friend Sam from Zengate. How are you?
Very good, Brian. Thanks for having me. So quick intro, my name's Sam, one of the co-founders of Zengate Global. Been working on the last 2.5 years building out the Palmyra platform and the Palmyra ecosystem, working with commodity producers and buyers all around the world. And today we're joined by Kyle, who's one of the Palmyra pioneers. He's an entrepreneur, one of the founders of Nature's Nectar, and has deep expertise in the social impact space, carbon credit markets, refi, the regenerative finance space. And we're really excited because he's been working on something outside of the honey business itself. And he's got a catalyst proposal and its real impact working with smallholder farmers in Zambia and other parts of Africa as well. So yeah, we're really excited to be able to talk a bit more about this in detail on the mainstream and demonstrate what blockchain can do for these people.
Yeah, thanks guys for having me. It's always fun to chat with Zengate and Palmyra and talk about these things. So cool.
Yeah, we've had quite a few conversations both through Zengate and through Twitter Spaces, and what you guys do and what you have been doing throughout blockchain and what you're trying to accomplish is really amazing. And I'm just glad that I get to try to help spread that story and help you on your journey, because I think what you do is very important and you're bringing access to people that have never had access in the past. And can you maybe just start out a little bit by just giving us an introduction of how you found blockchain and crypto, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit about your honey business before we get into all the other stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, my name's Kyle. I live in Zambia, just outside of, really in the capital city, Lusaka. I've been here the last 10 years. Like 2 weeks ago, marked 10 years, which was, it's an accomplishment, but it's like, I don't know, it's just a number. But in 2018, me and my wife started a honey business called Nature's Nectar. Well, sorry, let me jump back. I came to Zambia originally as a Peace Corps volunteer. So I worked in a village as a teacher for about 2 years. During that process, worked with other community groups and projects within the community around, an environmental club at the school. We did a savings and lending group, helped, kind of facilitate some bookkeeping and business skills. And then after Peace Corps, me and my wife, or my now wife, she was also a Peace Corps volunteer. We got married in 2017, and then right at the beginning of 2018, we started our own honey company. So what got me into blockchain? That's kind of a longer story into the honey company, but essentially what we do at the honey company is work with conservation organizations to help provide sustainable beehives to beekeepers around these areas so that there's reduced threats on national parks. So I would say a lot of conservation in the past has been focused mostly on law enforcement and like anti-poaching efforts, and less focused on like, it's kind of like prisons in the US, less focused on rehabilitation or other options that are alternatives to poaching. Charcoal is the major source of cooking fuel in Zambia. Like, it's bad for people's health. There's a lot of problems with that. That contributes to deforestation. So these are the types of problems I like to try and solve. And beekeeping is a way to bring those communities in around conservation. So we distribute beehives that are sustainable. We invest about $250, $300 per beekeeper we work with. And we have about 2,500 beekeepers that we work with now. And we provide a market, pay a premium, and we have the data because we wanted the data. Very few people are able to prove their impact if it's requested. We just wanted to be able to know that what we were doing was positive, and be able to just like understand and be aware of that. So we aim to protect forests and provide sustainable incomes through beekeeping. How I got into blockchain, if we want to jump there, we were fundraising, with impact investors, and I'll put it in quotes. Had a term sheet on the table. It was agreed to, went to contract. The contract was very different. And then essentially me and my wife felt like we were being kind of pushed around. So us and our other business partners said no. And then throughout that process, our other business partner went and exited, and kind of a lot of issues within that, like that whole, it felt like a big betrayal to me, because I thought we were all on the same page. And that felt like that because of transparency, because there wasn't transparency. And then I found blockchain, like this is a system. Well, I knew about it. I knew about Bitcoin, but had never really gotten that deep into it because I was living in a village in northwestern Zambia. So then I, was looking for transparency and eventually found my way to Cardano and impact focused projects. So yeah.
It's a really interesting story, right? And the fact that you even found Cardano while you're in Zambia, right? It's just kind of, pretty interesting to me. Can we talk a little bit about the honey industry to start this conversation? I know we've had this conversation in the past about it being the most adulterated source of almost anything in the world, right? And I think it's important that we talk about how blockchain can kind of help solve that issue. You know more than me, sir.
Yeah, so the honey industry, if we look at it generally across the board, there's a lot of middlemen essentially within the system, and all honeys have different flavors, right? So there isn't a standard honey technically. I would say in the States, most honey is just clover honey. It's just general fields of grass, and it all tastes pretty similar. You can get variations. You always try a local honey in one part of the country and another part of the country on the same crop. It does taste slightly different. The kind of honey we produce is a multifloral forest honey, and so it's just natural flowers from the trees in the forest. Generally, what would happen from like a production area in Zambia, let's say we've got a 20-ton order to Europe, and a wholesale bulk, it'll go to Europe, a whole container. A middleman broker who has clients at supermarkets and or bottle their own brands and or just move it on to where that they have customers and just make that small markup. What happens at those facilities a lot is blending of honey. So you get a certain flavor profile that is liked in this market. Let's say Norway, for some reason, popped in my head. Norway wants this flavor profile, and that can be built out of Zambian honey or Vietnamese honey, but always, let's say, Argentinian honey. So those are the kind of facilities that blend for the flavor profiles. Okay. And then kind of from there, it moves to markets, to more retail markets.
Yeah. That's quite interesting. And how do you think, like, what issue?
Yeah, the traceability. Yeah. So a lot of Zambian honey goes down to South Africa, or it has in the past. And there is honey that comes up. A lot of like retail supermarkets in Zambia, a lot of products are brought in from South Africa. Zambia is a landlocked country. So, that's where the closest and best infrastructure is to bring up quality goods. There's honey that comes up from South Africa that on the back says product of South Africa and or Vietnam and or Argentina and or Zambia and or China. So they are bulking, they're buying from everywhere and blending at some facility in South Africa probably, or even outside and it's just brought in, I don't know. But they don't have consistent supplies, but those are similar flavor profiles. I don't like to see that on shelves in Zambia, when we've got plenty of pure Zambian honey here. But if you're not at a retail shop and you're buying it off the side of the road, a lot of that isn't, like, it can be adulterated. Essentially, cane sugar is cheaper and you can make molasses and mix it with a little bit of honey. And by the time the person's, 100 kilometers down the road home or whatever, you can't go and find that person again. So it's, and that happens in a lot of honeys, rice sugars and different types of sugars can stay ahead of testing. So understanding who produced it, where the hives are. If, like us, if we're using an outgrower scheme, we want to be able to batch by community, or if, like, let's say there's a bigger producer, an individual who can produce their own batch, that'd be great. But we want to know that so that our buyers have confidence down the line. They can go and mix it. I won't ever know really what they're doing. I want them to do the right thing. So it's kind of the same way of, we collect this data because we want it, but we also want to be able to work with buyers who want the real thing and don't want to adulterate it after it gets past us, and provide that real impact story.
Yeah. It's really interesting. You brought up that you work with a bunch of small farmers. Can you talk about some of the issues those small farmers see and just how you work with them and everything that's kind of involved in that process?
Yeah, so the farmers we work with are generally, people who live on around $2 a day, have 5 to 7 members of their family, probably closer to 7. When we started our business, we moved out to a village in northwestern province where there's a conservation project they agreed to work with us. So we're like, cool, we'll be out there. We will be doing this. So that was including Peace Corps. We lived in the village for 7.5 years, with limited water, or like water from the well in the backyard pulled up by a bucket, hot shower from the kettle on the gas burner.
Funny story, Kyle. I have a well also.
Yeah, dude, they're great. One thing I've always said, when we have the ability to build a house and buy some property, I always want a long drop toilet. I want seriously, I want an outhouse, because if plumbing goes bad, it's bad. So we lived out in the community with these, or in the community in the village, And we were 80 kilometers from a tarmac road. So, and it took us 2.5 hours. We had our own vehicle. Like I'm very privileged to be able to have that vehicle, right? But most people are taking the minibus and it gets stuck and it's not 4-wheel drive. And the bank is 4.5 hours away. Like you can't, even if you can access finance, you go to the bank 4.5 hours, you're probably, well, that's my driving, not on a public like minibus. You know, that's a whole day essentially. Then you have to stay overnight somewhere. Then you have to be at the bank early so you get in the line quick. Then you get what you need, and hopefully you can catch the afternoon bus back if there is one that day. You know, that's if you qualify for finance. You know,
Yeah.
and most people don't. You know, those are very few people do. So being able to like lift yourself up and tie your shoes on tight, yeah, you can do that, but like you can get knocked down really, really quick. Like if, let's say you go to the bank, you somehow become bankable and you go to the bank and you get this loan, you probably need it in cash or assets. Somebody steals that money, you're done. You know what I mean? Like it's probably not insured. You probably don't have insurance. You're still going to owe the bank. Like it's a challenge.
Yeah, and just a few things, Kyle, just to follow up on that. You mentioned the wage that they're living on each day. Like this is a common issue that we've found in other commodity markets that we've dealt with, and there's been huge outrage in terms of, like particularly with tea, just because of the slump in the market, payment to the workers. And some markets have actually done a better job, and whether or not it's the right market mechanics, that's one thing, but they have done a good job around setting like ratios of like what a smallholder producer should be getting, based on like prices being sold at the auction. Those
Yeah.
are more structured markets. Honey is sort of not always like that, but the data is actually really important, because this is the sort of stuff that you can then go to a bank or some form of financial institution to actually show that funds are coming in. So I'm just curious, when it comes to what you guys are doing, like how important is this? If the banks are so far away, like I assume these are cash payments, like how important is actually recording this stuff, and what would the impact look like? Because we're focused on that. We want to capture through our Pomaro Pro application payments, whether that's actually happening digitally or through cash, because we understand from a credit point of view, it's actually vital for the smallholders we work with.
Yeah. I mean, so we pay a premium for the honey and the beekeepers we work with, because they use sustainable hives that are also provided throughout the system. It's very subsidized. It's really a side hustle. It's like it's a pretty passive income, because it's natural occupation, and natural absconsion. We don't use like queen excluders. I don't really say it's beekeeping. I say it's a housing project for bees. That also protects the forest, but it's about a 25% annual income increase with honey right now for these specific communities, but they're also farmers of other commodities at the same time. So most people grow cassava and maize or corn. Quite a few people grow beans. But getting those commodities to markets is a challenge, the same challenge of going to the bank. And having that record that is verified is valuable. So this kind of transitions, I think, a little bit into the catalyst proposal and savings groups and that kind of stuff. Excuse me. So having a verified record of your transactions and how responsible you are with your money is valuable, right? I think we can all generally agree that being able to show that you're responsible with your money is good. If you don't have a system to do that, you you can't go to the bank. But there are systems within the same communities of beekeepers that we work with and that I worked with during Peace Corps. I worked with one of these groups during Peace Corps. It's kind of like a local co-op where this one was designed around Catholic Relief Services, savings, and internal lending communities. It's called SILC, SILC. And what everybody does is they put a certain amount of money in. There's a minimum and a maximum contribution each week. Other members, everybody in the group does that. It gets loaned out within members. Loans are recorded. When repayments occur, they're recorded. Essentially, there is a ledger or a few ledgers recorded in a notebook most of the time by a few members of the group through their governance system that they have internally. And so it's a self-regulating system because of social pressure and because it's local, right? Because you're saving and borrowing and lending and repaying with your neighbor. They can see if you went and bought a TV instead of buying the seed you were trying to buy. Then they'll be like, "Oh, you didn't repay? You got to turn that TV into a business now." Or let me watch the TV too. So there's ways people will figure this out. The group I worked with, their first savings and lending cycle was about 15 women, and they saved and earned over 8 months about $1,200. And I can't remember the second cycle, but the third cycle was 75 women and $25,000. So it was like $330 a person over 8 months, which is way more than a 25% annual income increase. That's like almost 100%, or about a 50%, right?
And to just and before we get into the details of it, I think it might be good to just quickly pause and quickly discuss why these systems exist, right? Like, one of the reasons I actually came into crypto in the first place is I had worked on an insurance automation type of project with some people that I used to work with. They're still doing it, and I ended up walking away, and I just became absolutely fascinated by this idea of parametric insurance. And parametric insurance is like an automated claims payout based on some form of data that gets fed. And it's a great use case for agricultural insurance claims. Like, let's say there's a flood or bad storm event. And that really I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And I still think about it because I think there's huge applications. And lo and behold, I then stumbled into Cardano, and through the Catalyst programs, I was a community reviewer. So I was looking at Catalyst proposals, I was reviewing it. One of the main reasons why I write all of the Zengate Catalyst proposals is because I used to review them. So I have some familiarity in that process. And the marketing side is separate. I get Theodore and I get Brian and Dan to help out with that. But there was a challenge. I remember I was reviewing focused around Africa, and there was a few ideas that kept coming up, and I don't think all of them got funded or ever got implemented, but that was sort of my coming in to learn about the ideas of different lending and savings groups. And I came across one that I still remember to this day. It's called a tontine, and these are like social insurance and social lending types of groups. But the reason they exist is because they don't have access to the traditional financial infrastructure. And that's sort of the really important thing just to outline. And I come from a family where both my parents are bankers. I've worked in companies that consulted for banks. I've literally worked on projects with banks. Like, this is a very familiar area in terms of the way we do it and the way we got brought up in the system. But many people don't have access to that. I probably had a bank account made when I was born and someone put money in it. But most people in the world don't have access to a system like that. And because they don't have access to the bank that's a 4-hour drive away and they have to spend time overnight, these systems have emerged. And the great thing about a social and a localized system like this is you have the community around you keeping you accountable. And many different forms of these systems exist all over places like Africa. Tontines are one, Silk's another one. and they have their own
I mean,
different flavor.
there's about 2 billion people in the world who use these systems, that are essentially, well, there's 2 billion unbanked people, and there's about 1 billion people who use these systems, and that is their primary source of financing and banking. It's wild to me. That it, and so what can Web3 do with that, right? So these groups that pool money together communally as a local community, they're pooling money. They have a minimum and a max and a minimum input and a maximum input each week. They're self-governing, so there's a constitution framework that exists for whatever program, be it a tontine or a silk or a VSLA or a village banking. There are templates to issue self-regulating constitutions. I think we can all see the overlap with what's going on in Cardano and a lot of blockchains right now is really Cardano with the governance, but these are self-constituting, self-governing, self-resourced groups. And if we can take those communities and essentially digitize, but also validate and verify through community verification, just as they do now by, Brian, you saw Sam give me the money and you recorded it. Great. If we can put that through a phone so that people's, essentially their transactions can be tracked for finance, and you could use, a side chain, zero knowledge proofs and all this stuff for identity, and use digital identities and verifiable credentials that are, obfuscated. Sam, you can't go to the bank right now without any collateral, right? And just say, hey, here's my record of transactions. I'm a responsible financier. You need collateral too, right? So that's the other piece that's missing. These systems work and are self-governing with the resources that are available. And then what is missing is collateral. So that is kind of a next step, or a bigger term, longer term vision is these community trusts or community treasuries that are used initially as collateral basis for communities, because people don't have land titles, they don't have bank accounts. Many of them may not have a national identity in the registry. Their names are different, like can be spelled different. People are potentially highly illiterate at times. There's a lot of challenges. What we've done with the honey can kind of be chopped and screwed, as they say in Houston, and mixed up and reconstituted for savings and lending groups. We can there's agent systems. So as we have field supervisors, there can be group supervisors who help vouch for these systems. So there's I think, like moving with community, with bringing collateral with communities is vitally important, so that people can access finance. And that also allows us to create a fairer system that is more transparent natively. Like, people are unbanked. Let's not move them to banks. Let's help them continue to create and grow their own banks.
Yeah, and access to capital has been like a really important piece of the puzzle that we've been trying to figure out. And there's sort of a broader piece at play. But for those listening as well, who are trying to get a grasp of what the actual problem is and the size of the problem in the trade financing market, there's a $2.5 trillion gap each year. These are producers, buyers, and traders looking to get deals financed. Like that, it's a humongous market. And in terms of like access to finance, you were talking about collateral. Like the way I think about lending is under like a framework of two. You either have collateral and you say, hey, here are my assets, I want to borrow against it. So when you get a car loan, for those people that drive cars and take out car loans, like like that car itself is the collateral that the bank can possess if they want to, if you miss some payments. But the other form is uncollateralized lending, right? And this is what you were talking about, which is, can you show your receipts around your income, your expense profiles? And personal finance allows you to do that. You can do that with cash flows for businesses. So for
Yeah.
SME financing, you will build credit models around the cash flows in and the cash flows out. You do that for big businesses as well. You can securitize stuff. So there's all sorts of complex systems at play. But really, at the end of the day, if you can prove through data, like spending profiles, income profiles, like that's a game changer. And I was quite fortunate to actually, one of the last big projects I did at my last job at Oliver Wyman was working with one of the biggest banks in Australia to help build out a credit model for personal finance. So we were looking at inflows and outflows using transaction data. It was like one of the first ever things that a bank had done, very innovative in terms of utilizing transaction data to basically categorize spending, categorize income, and map that out using the transaction narratives that you have in the data, to create these spending curves and these income curves to automatically do it without relying on a credit bureau. So this sort of a game changer when we were working on it, and it just became very obvious to me that, and from my end, very fortunate that I had proof of receipts of income coming into my bank account. My expenses I could prove because I had 2 or maybe 3 accounts I was just spending money through, every month when money came in. So like for me, it was straightforward. We'd had access to banking our entire life. For people who can't actually prove that, you can't go and get like a loan from a bank. Just like that doesn't happen, especially if you're taking cash payments constantly. So this idea of a localized sort of it's almost like a localized system to build community collateral. I'm just curious,
Yeah.
like what does the future actually look like for these systems? Because one option is the banking infrastructure gets very good and enables you to actually connect into these markets, or you actually get a more localized system that advances, and you'd get these more digitized tontines, silks, and saving programs within the community, which grows the collateral. And a system like that is quite unique because it enables you to grow collateral in a different asset class, right? Like, for example,
Yeah.
if you're building collateral in digital assets, you now have access to the digital assets infrastructure for borrowing, lending that maybe you wouldn't have had access to through a local domestic bank. So I'm quite curious, like, what is the direction? I know the banks for a long time have tried to think about different union systems and access points, but like, what's the future look like, and what are the big roadblocks? And the main thing that people always ask is, what does internet connectivity look like in many of these areas? And is this one of those things which will be a game changer, which completely changes the need for the infrastructure that currently exists within banking?
Yeah. So I can think of a few points. So internet access, generally, maybe there. Let's give it a coin flip. Some communities have it, some of them don't. Really depends on how close to community or to like the road they are, essentially. And where, so yeah, the internet access is a challenge. But let's take a single savings group that has access to internet now, right? The one I worked with in Peace Corps had access to internet, but they still kept paper ledgers, as Sam was saying. And or as I would, when I add on there is you can't take those 3 paper ledgers to the bank and they say, cool, yeah, great, we'll finance you. I wrote that all down over the last 2 nights just sitting in my house. Actually, that's what I did. Got my friends to sign it. They won't ever trust it. The bank can't verify it. It's not digital. Where I want these things to go is, and I don't know where they are going, everything's kind of up in the air. I feel like generally in the world, I don't think the banks will like this in most markets, but in some markets they may be very, very open to it, because it can help bring in new customers, right? So the local retail and commercial banks here in Zambia, they can't access these people right now. And right now in Zambia, in savings and lending groups, I was at a conference a couple weeks ago. A guy from a USAID project said that he heard recently that there was $57 million in these savings and lending groups in Zambia right now. That money is unbanked money. It essentially will not enter the bank because the people who hold it can't enter the bank, essentially, can't use the bank. If that $57 million were available for, let's say, more open lending outside of those groups, there's a couple $1 million funding gap for buying honey across the country right now that a lot of honey companies face. There's, and that doesn't keep the power with the farmers, so because there's overlap in these systems, some of the beekeepers we work with and they also use savings groups. There can be major overlap for growing these community collateral systems. So I've got a friend who works in carbon, and I was hoping to send the email today, and I slipped my mind. We've been talking about these community collateral systems. So in Zambia, most carbon is from Red Plus or forest conservation credits is generally what it is. That generally needs to involve the communities, and most times does, where the communities contribute and get payouts, like a profit share. That profit share is how it's moved into those communities can vary, and it's not transparent. So what I was talking to a friend about was, he's like, what if these credits as credits, you do a credit share, not a profit share, not a revenue share. The community gets those credits and can choose whatever broker that they have to work with to sell it. Potentially, they could just hold those credits if they're tokenized in a community treasury, if the community can agree to use that as a community fund. And if it were primarily used as an insurance mechanism or for collateral, for borrowing against to get access to finance, so then the banks can come in. You've got the collateral, you've got the records from the savings groups, you've got the records from the carbon project you participated in, and now the bank will finance you because you've got this community collateral. It's potentially they would leverage it, but I don't think they would. You could borrow 50% of that collateral and coordinate with your community how to use that money.
Yeah, because I think one of the bigger challenges that you might run into, which this could resolve, is the on and off ramping process, right? So if you're dealing with digital assets from the beginning as the assets coming in or the income coming in, like that's a bit of a game changer, right? Because now all of a sudden you might have a tokenized credit or some form of tokenized social impact credit, whatever it is, that if it has a tradable market on chain, you're now left with the opportunity to hold on-chain assets. So you as a community lending group and savings group, you may not want to have exposure to these credits, but if you could hold a stable coin like Moneda, like USDM, you could hold US dollars on chain. So yeah, that's very interesting because yeah, Moneda man.
I hope he's watching.
I hope so as well. That's why I said it. And I hope that they a system like that changes the game a bit. And I guess there's other questions as well. If you can prove, like, the way I think about it's around like credit worthiness, but you can think of it as like the track record of a lendings group, you know,
Yeah.
banks and different financing organizations lend to each other as well. So you have a system where you can begin to start pooling these funds as well, where you can have intra-community lending groups. And it's sort of like a fractal. You can really just go up and up and up, and
Yeah.
maybe the
Yeah. You
system
create
over
these.
time it's cross-border. So I am
Yeah. You
I'll
create
hand over.
federated lending networks essentially. Be really cool if you could connect them to stake pools so that there's essentially a risk-free rate on Cardano. You connect it with mining pools. There's a risk-free
Yeah.
rate on Bitcoin via the emissions. Like,
And
yeah,
and there's just so you're aware, I know of a project Yam4 who's working on stuff like this, right? Where there are no repayment terms and no specific time frame because your ADA is staked and it's earning over time. So what those guys are doing is really interesting, and I think that it can play a lot into what you're trying to do.
yeah, yeah. I've never looked at Yam4. I heard the ad they did on Cardano over coffee for a while, but I never looked into it. But I will now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
that's
still
great.
building. They're still in the early, like, I think they're getting closer. I think their test net is out and running and has been for a while. I think the version 2 of their test net. So they're progressing. So I would, something
Cool.
like that, I would definitely, I think it could help you in what you're trying to accomplish.
No, for sure. Yeah, yeah,
So just Kyle, just to recap as well, to focus a bit back on the Catalyst proposal. The problem is
yeah,
there's a lot of unbanked communities in Africa, in some of the markets that you deal with. And from what I understand, there's existing systems and governance systems that already exist where communities come together to, over a period of time, grow collateral, provide opportunities to insure against things that happen, if there's floods or bad events. And this is all happening because they can't go and call an insurance company up and get a policy. They can't call a bank up and quickly get something set up or borrow money. So how big of an opportunity is this? Like, how many people around the world are unbanked? What's your current focus? Like, what is the actual solution around the Catalyst proposal? Just so for those that are listening to the mainstream can have a look, and like, what's the elevator pitch here for what you
yeah.
have?
So essentially, right, there's 2 billion unbanked people in the world. Um, a solution to fix that is using localized community savings and lending, and cycling of resources, compounding of your local resources. That is only so effective because you only have local resources. So if we can bring these existing and successful frameworks on chain via digital identities and verifiable credentials, we've got part one, right? And part two is the collateral. So this proposal is really around developing with communities, developing with NGOs who have formalized or semi-formalized these structures, and then working with microfinance institutions or banks or other financiers to see where interest lies and to see not really where interest lies, but where value lies. Where do they see value? What are the data points that that communities want to express outwardly and are comfortable expressing outwardly? What are the what are the same thing with financiers? What are they comfortable with expressing? But also, what do they need? What do communities need? So the proposal is really around kind of those three target groups and developing collaborative onboarding plans, as I've called them, where we do some really basic education on and kind of highlight what exists out there and how those things are used. So like Empower is important, World Mobile is important, Common Lands, Mav 100, like as a community network, right? It's a great structure to learn from. These types of projects can help. Sorry, I lost my train of thought on my pitch.
No, I think that makes sense. No, that I
Yeah.
think that answers it well. So in terms of
So we'll work with,
yeah,
essentially we'll work with communities to co-develop a framework that everybody finds important.
yeah. And one of
Yeah.
the things that people always ask around Cutler's proposal is what is the impact for Cardano? And a lot of us in our team, we talk a lot about the whiteboard videos of Charles talking about Cardano infrastructure, but really the video that hooked a lot of our team members, which we share very common values around, is Charles's TED Talk, where he talked about banking the unbanked and providing the right opportunities for people that don't have access to them. And for me, when I hear about some of the stuff you're working on, like I immediately think about that 2017 vision that was laid out for us. So I'm just curious, like when I, ask you the question, like what's the impact for Cardano, and why should blockchain care about these things, and why should the community get behind this proposal?
Yeah, I mean, Charles's TED Talk, like that vision is why I'm here. It's why I'm in the crypto space in general. You know, if it wasn't Cardano and it was somewhere else, this is what I would be trying to achieve. Yeah, I've bought some pig coin, but you know, like it was a little bit of funny money. That was it. Bringing RealFi forward is what will drive real adoption, right? The banking structure already exists and it works as it's designed for the people it's designed to work for. It is not designed to work within rural Zambia. So we need to redesign, and not even redesign, but we need to take the existing structures that work and create a network effect around them for people to grow and self-finance. And if it's natively on chain, these people will natively live on chain. That is where they will know the bank is. You know, they'll go to town when, you know, let's say this all works and 30 years from now, some kid goes and takes pictures at the bank museum because banks don't physically exist anymore. You know, oh, look at this money counter. It was a little machine. You had to press physical buttons to count the money. It'd be great if that were just on somebody's phone and like they had the full control via their identity mechanisms. And I don't know. Yeah, my wife was telling me, she's like, oh, I had to write a letter to the bank today about some payment that's been waiting around for 3 weeks, not going out, because the financial institution isn't looking at the documents that we sent them. The bank isn't working for us even, right? Like
we've faced similar issues
yeah.
as well as a company trying to set up bank accounts in some of the markets that we have subsidiaries in, and it's taken months. Still some unresolved as well, and it just makes you ponder, like, is it that complicated when you can easily set up and self-custody a stable coin to make a payment to someone? So it's
Yeah.
and the great thing is in many markets, like I think of Indonesia as a great example, and Malaysia and some of these other Asian countries that live digitally, like they like the payments happen electronically, like these systems already exist at scale. And yes, like in some of these countries it's plugged into the financial systems there, but these people living rurally and in these villages, like they're so digitally native now, they're making payments to each other. Like if you go and pick up some groceries, some vegetables from the local store, you can make an electronic payment. People live in this digital world where they want to be able to see. They don't want to have to wait for the bank to open. Like even in Japan, a highly developed country, the bank closes at like 3 p.m. on most days, and you have to, like, I remember I had to do some proof of resident checks, which I had to get my bank to declare, because
I
I
had to
couldn't
do
call
mine a
my
couple weeks ago at the
yeah.
bank.
But the reason I went to the bank is because my gas bill, I called the gas company up and they said they couldn't do it. even though they know where I live, and they typically, like, because I pay with my credit card, my gas bill, because of that, I couldn't do it. I actually went to their support office in town a few times to try to figure it out. And the last result was a bank, and I went to the bank, and I had to go before 3 p.m. so that they could actually generate this request. Then they have to send it to the local bank that I signed up with in the first place, which was in Tokyo. So I'm in Osaka. They have to message their friends in Tokyo, get them
Which
to
branch did
write
you
something
open
up.
this account at?
Exactly, and the branch has to put a
That's
stamp
asked
of
me to me a million
approval.
times.
They had to physically then send that paperwork to Osaka, and then they sent that to me, and it just it was ridiculous, to be honest. But
So
the
think about
system
that.
does not work in your favor in many cases.
Think about that in a country where the roads are full of potholes, and that takes days then at times to move things at times. For us to go get the cash we needed to buy honey, we would have to drive 2.5 hours to the bank and 2.5 hours home. So it's a full day essentially, right?
And based
Or
on
half
the
the day
conversations you're
traveling.
having, and based on the conversations you're having with these people, like when we were in Sri Lanka, we ran a bunch of workshops, and one of the things that actually surprised me the most is a producer asked us, "Hey, can you guys do like digital asset payments? And can we take stable coins?" And we said, "Wait a second, like we're not talking about that." But you brought something up. This was over a year ago, and I'm just curious, like, do you have conversations with groups like this? Like, do they show like, what's the initial sort of interest around digitization, and what's it going to take to get us there? Because that is where it's going to go. Like, we know that that's the direction, right? Cash
Yeah.
is the role of cash in society is transformed. Like COVID completely transformed it. Like even a cash focused country like Japan is now
The
like
United
this. It's
Sam, the
completely
United
transformed.
States, right? Even in the United States, cash is completely changed. If I go to a big event at an arena down in Pittsburgh, cashless, I can't take cash in there and spend it anywhere. They won't accept it, which blows my mind, but the world's changing. And I would love to hear kind of what your conversations are and how they've gone.
Yeah, so mobile money is huge, right? Across most of Africa. When I was in South Africa last month at the end of the month, and I saw people tapping with their phones, and I was like, "What are they doing?" Oh, wait, they're paying with their phones. Wild! That blew my mind because I'm at you still have to text the money essentially. Like that's where it's at in Zambia. So crypto payments are probably not on the 1 or 2 year horizon, but integrations of crypto payments and stable coins with mobile money is highly valuable to be able to build those collateralization mechanisms or provide financing externally, like outside of the country. There are systems for it. And if we want to do crypto payment, but really it's mostly about tokens are identity. Tokens are credentials. Tokens show that you can be trusted if you have the right ones, or they're assigned to you essentially. And we can integrate with mobile money. People don't need. I don't think payments need to go on chain immediately. That's a secondary goal.
Perhaps the data of the payment happening can sit on chain along with all of the various DIDs and the credentials that you're after in the first place. So
exactly.
That's the approach we've taken for the Palmyra platform, just because we're working with a lot of just standard businesses who are looking to source commodities. They're not Web3 native businesses at the end of the day. And being able to capture the payment happening on the fiat side, or in your case, the mobile credit side, I think would be sufficient to be able to demonstrate data of income and the track record of income being produced for these people.
Yeah, it just shows value flow. Really all money is in our monetary systems are how fast is it flowing? And how much is it kind of self-compounding, If we can bring these systems down to the community level that are community designed and essentially created by the community, that's the best way forward. Essentially, traditional finance is designed for the West, and it culturally doesn't work here in Zambia. So we need to redesign the financial system, and Cardano is the place to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to go back to kind of the whole vision, like Sam had touched on before, and it's the reason why I got into Cardano. It's the first video I saw was the whiteboard, and it's about giving people access, right? And as you said, these people don't 2-hour drive just to get to the bank. To me, is like mind blowing. But I live in America, so it's different here in the West. So like that's everyday life for them, and to be able to give that type of access, like where we have, or just the banking, and you said it earlier, not so much banking the unbanked, but having them create themselves as their bank.
Yeah.
I think that's really important in the process of blockchain, and it is what blockchain can do. And I think that the financing and the lending and the borrowing is definitely an interesting route with blockchain. It's again something that's very simple, but to pull the funds together in a community and be able to access that, like they've never been able to have that access before. It's game changer. It's literally a game changer.
It is, and then you add on other services on top of that, right? So let's say there's a community treasury or collateralization or community trust that has finance. That trust could buy world mobile nodes for communities around them that don't have internet, and they can buy a Starlink or attach to the ISP, and they can start providing network. But that is an asset. That's an income source for this community. So that will just grow the pot, right? There's so many like targeted investments that could be really cool if these things are built, but they've got to be built. So that's what we're trying to do. Is take the people from unbanked to own banked, as I'm saying, where you own the bank because you are an owner of the bank. Yeah.
Yeah, I was having a very simple conversation with a friend of mine yesterday actually about compound interest, and I was just showing him the basic law of compound interest. And I said, if you put this amount in for 20 years, it looks like this. If you add another 10 years, it looks like this. And it was like off the screen, and he was like, what the heck? Like, I didn't realize that. And there's a great book by Thomas Piketty, who's an economist, and he talks about the growth. It looks at like wealth creation, and the growth rate on capital is far higher than wage increases. And there's a reason why inequality persists, because if you think about like just normal jobs, like at what rate is your income increasing every year? The stock market in the long run has been going up 7 or 8% per annum, right?
Yeah.
That's the risk-free rate for money for treasuries right now. It's what, 4% or 5% for T-bills. For higher asset classes, it's far more. If you're doing that every single year, the compounding effect just continues to grow and grow and grow. But if you're starting off with nothing, which most people are in the world, and you're just trying to grow your income, which I think is the typical, that's the starting point. So you don't really even think about the wealth creation process. You're just trying to grow your $2 per day income, like 20% a year if you can, but it doesn't work that way. So I think having community collateral and having access to the wider digital assets ecosystem for yielding opportunities, if you want to lend money to other places, stake, operate your own air nodes or earth nodes in a pooled capacity, is a game changer for wealth creation. And it doesn't have to be like we want to turn these places into billionaires overnight, but wealth creation is a slow process, and it starts with the creation of assets and cash flow And doing it with a community-focused approach can really transform lives and the flow of money, and then the recycling of that back into infrastructure and education and literacy around finances. It really does make an impact. And like, for those that don't know about Thomas Piketty, like, you should just go on YouTube and watch a video about that, because the rate of growth of capital and the rate of return of capital always exceeds the rate of wage growth. And this is why we have persistent income inequality and wealth inequality all around the world. And it starts with that. And I think having a very simple infrastructure around community savings groups enables
Yeah.
you to have all these other options down the line.
And pairing it with something like being a beekeeper with Nature's Nectar, where here's the source of income, I'm aware of that. You've got let's say you've got a DID and some verifiable credentials, and then you're also a member of a savings group. These things have overlap, and they create value together. They create value. They're larger than the sum of the parts, essentially. And yeah, we can take that compound interest and build it really from the bottom up. Like, we can make bottom up banking fully possible with, like,
It is.
most of it's there, right?
Yeah.
It's there.
Yeah, it's just a little bit of building that you need to duke out now. We'll all work on it together.
It's just time, man. It's time. We'll all build it together. And that's I think that's the hardest thing for a lot of us, is time. Like, be persistent, continue pushing, keep going. Like, the time will come. There are tough times, but
Tough times are usually followed by good times, my friend. So
exactly.
I want to just kind of wrap this up here a little bit and just say thank you very much for joining. I think this has been an amazing conversation, and the things that you're working on, please continue to do that and continue to bring blockchain to the mainstream. I think it's important. I think it's important that we work on these things, because they are life-changing. They might not be life-changing for me, but they're life-changing for other people. And that's very important to me, is to leave this world a better place than when I came into it. And I think we're on that right path. And I think that you're working towards that, and just want to say thank you and continue that. Sam, any parting words before we call it a day?
Yeah, well, I think for those that are listening from the Cardano community, there's a clear call to action, which is to go have a look at the proposal, show some support, retweet it, and vote for it as well. Talk about it, because this is the sort of stuff that Charles was talking about for years. This is the stuff he's talked about when I've met him and had lunch with him as well. So, like, this is really important. I think we need to see more projects like this. And Kyle has been in Africa for the last 10 years. He's on the ground. He's not trying to do this from the outside. He's seen what these systems look like and the gaps, and he's been able to have a crack at it and figure out what is required. He sees the opportunities that Web3 brings. So that's it on that front. But for everyone else that doesn't know about Cardano, go have a look, obviously, but show some support. Kyle's business, Nature's Nectar, it's listed as he's one of our Palmyra pioneers, so we have him listed on the Palmyra platform. So if you want to source some honey directly from Zambia, go have a look there, and you've got all the things with cross-border payments and escrow and everything you need to make the transaction process easier. So reach out to us if you have any questions. But Kyle, thanks for coming on. It's great to see you sort of on the ground having a crack at this.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It's always great to just hear about what you guys are doing and see what you guys are building, and also, other people in the community. With Save Network, we're working with Self-Driven, and Mark and Bensay are kind of leading the charge from their side, and I'll give them a big shout out. Go follow them. They're building essentially a big, wide open tool set for community building, for systems like this. They want people to be self-driven. So go follow Self-Driven as well. We'll be listing more honey soon. Hopefully organic certifications it's getting close. We'll be trying to get our bucket suppliers and all that stuff down. Sourcing those things in Zambia are sometimes a challenge, but we'll get there. Go vote for our proposal. Thanks, guys, for having me, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Kyle. And please stop by one of the many Twitter spaces we have going on. We always love your input. Make sure, folks, that you check out the Palm Economy, the Palmyra app, something that Zengate has been building for a while. And the public sells live now. So if you're interested in that thing, please join us on X. Come hang out, our Discord. We'd love to have you. Kyle, I appreciate your time. Sam, it's always a pleasure. You're such a great mind in finance. I've learned so much from you over the short period of time, and I appreciate that. Everybody, it's the mainstream, and we're going to drive adoption, and we're going to change the world together. So thanks for watching.
Let's go.